Hey everyone, welcome back to Colorful Indian. I hope that you've been having a great week. Today is Therapy Thursday, and we do have a topic that would be the no-nos in relationships. So the four horsemen of relationships. So if you're familiar with the four horsemen, they appear in the Bible and they signify the ending of the world. Similarly, these four horsemen in relationships signify the ending of a relationship. So if you're interested in finding out what these things are and how we can kind of rectify them and kind of change our behaviors, then stick around because I'm going to be talking about that. I do love this topic. It's one of my favorites actually because I really do love marriage and family therapy. That is probably one of my biggest passions when it comes to therapy, and I'm really excited to discuss these four horsemen with you. My name is RANITA and I like to do indie makeup tutorials, reviews, swatches. I also dabble in lifestyle and today of course mental health, but we are going to be featuring one brand today, and that is Simply Posh Cosmetics. I do have a code with them, so if you're interested in picking anything up, you can use my code to get 10% off. I'm going to be creating a really beautiful autumn look today because I just feel like, yeah, why not? It's that season, and Simply Posh has got some really beautiful palettes. So I'm going to be featuring Citrus Punch. That's this one over here. It's got a very summery kind of vibe, but I do like some of these shimmers and shades in here, and I feel like they would be absolutely perfect for fall. I'm also going to be going in with Very Icy, which is more cool toned when you think about it, but some of these shades can work beautifully for fall. So I'm not going to be touching the blue section, probably going to be going up there for some of those mattes. And last but not least, I am going to be featuring Autumn Leaves, which is a very old palette by Simply Posh, probably some of the first palettes that they had released, and it was one of my favorites because this was a palette with 12 duochromes, and they're really gorgeous shades. I remember trying this out and just falling in love with it. So I thought, well, it's time for, autumn looks to be created, and I think that I really want to dip back into this. So yeah, let's get into that. Let's begin with the very first horseman, that is criticism. Criticism goes a lot more than just, complaining about something, because we all have complaints about our partners, and in this particular video I'm also kind of extending this to friendships as well. There are going to be things about people that we don't like, and the way that we express that really does matter, because criticism is when you're literally attacking the core of someone's personality or character. You're making them feel like something's wrong with them, and it can affect the other person who's being attacked in a very profound way because they end up feeling rejected. They end up feeling very hurt. So criticism is actually something that if it's happening a lot, in that particular relationship, it's going to pave the way for something much worse, which is actually contempt. So how do we combat criticism? I think one way is to learn to express yourself in a different way. So criticism is something along the lines of, you never take out the trash. You always expect me to do everything, and I'm actually really tired. So, you just don't care about how I feel, and it just goes on and on and on because you're just taking that and you're putting that on them. Another way of expressing that in a more positive way is to use I statements. I statements start with the word I, and you actually go, I feel a little stressed out sometimes when I don't see the trash being taken out, because I just like having a clutter-free house, and I know that you're tired too, but I'd really appreciate your help with this, and I really appreciate all the other things that you're doing in the house, and I just would really appreciate if you could sometimes do this if I'm not doing it. And it's a very different approach from the first one, because over here you're going to that person out of love, and you're saying that you need help in this area because you're not able to do it. I've had experience with criticism, and I in real life have gone up to people and been like, I feel this way and I do need help in these situations, because I do generally try to blame myself first before blaming the other person for something that's happened. And that's just something that I have learned through Christian marriage counseling with my husband. We did some sessions with a couple of our older Christian friends, and it was really helpful. We learned that loving someone is not about just automatically assuming that the other person is to blame, but sometimes it can also be coming from us. And that's one of the reasons why if I go up to people and I go, hey, am I have I done something, in this situation? It's usually because I want to make sure that, it's not just in my head, because everyone has insecurities. I certainly have them. And, sometimes you can be acting from that insecurity and just, you can just end up attacking someone, and then that just ends up being terrible. So that's one of the reasons why I do like to first blame myself essentially before going and blaming someone. This is something that I have tried to actually bring up more in my life, and using I statements, like I have said before, is actually really helpful, because you're basically expressing yourself and how you feel about the situation, and you're not really attacking the other person when you do that, because it's just how you feel. And when you're in any kind of relationship, friendship, romantic, it's just the fact that you need to be able to care about what the other person is saying, because that's how the relationship becomes deeper. It may sound stupid to you, it may be ridiculous to you, but if this is really affecting your partner in such a way, it should matter to you, especially if they're trying and they're coming up to you with an I statement. So let's just say the criticism goes on and on and on and on for a very long time. This is when something else starts to happen, because the partner starts to have contempt. Contempt is essentially when you believe that you are better. This is a very ugly display of pride to me. It is basically putting ego and pride ahead of the relationship. And when you have contempt, you essentially are making the other person feel like you don't do anything wrong. Everything is constantly the other person's fault. Contempt is actually one of the worst things that you can have in any kind of relationship, because it will kill it. It will absolutely kill it, to be made to feel constantly like no matter what you do, no matter what you try, it is never enough, it is not good enough, it is not doing anything. So how can we counter contempt? That is to remember that when you're in a fight, remember that the person that you're fighting with, we obviously need to learn how to fight better, but the other thing is always to remember that this person that you're talking to also has a lot of good qualities. And it can be very hard in certain situations to actually see that this individual standing in front of you has good qualities. But what I have noticed from my life is that the good relationships that I have with friends, this is really easy to do. Even though you get angry with someone, you suddenly realize, you know what? I know that, they're saying something that I don't really like. However, I know this person, I know the way that they are inside, and I know that these are their good qualities. It comes very easily and very naturally, actually, when you have built relationships in a certain healthy way. I've found that in very unhealthy relationships that I've had in my life, it's the exact opposite, because it seems almost impossible to feel safe enough to express yourself to someone who's constantly being contemptuous towards you. It is definitely feeling like you are morally superior than someone. That is really what contempt is all about. It is, I'm better than you. That is the perspective that the person who's, having contempt actually is coming from. I am better than you, so that means I'm right, and it doesn't really matter what you have to say, because why would it? I know everything. I'm better than you. It's a terrible position to come from. And what's really interesting is that the Gottman Institute has actually found that people who engage in contempt a lot, they actually develop immune problems. I don't know, for me, that's just mind-blowing. The fact that you can actually think that you're morally superior to someone and then end up getting sick for it. I mean, that's really interesting and really fascinating, because it actually tells me that we're not meant to have that kind of stand towards any human being. My church actually did a sermon, a lot of sermons on the 10 Commandments, and there was this one sermon that they had talked about, which is, do not murder. And it was really, really fascinating, because they were talking about how when you devalue a person's worth, their intrinsic worth and value, which God has given us, that in itself is also murder, because you're literally harming them with your words in that way. And that really made me realize the importance of words, and how it matters a lot the way that we actually speak and communicate to people, especially when we are fighting with them. It really, really highlighted that to me. And it's hard to make these changes, but it is not impossible, because we do have control over the way that we choose to respond to something. The way you respond is a choice, ultimately, at the end of the day. So one more thing about contempt is that this is long-term negative thoughts about the person that you have contempt for. And it's actually a very painful thing to actually experience, because personally I have actually gone through this with someone in my life. I went through it for years, more than 2 decades actually, and to come to that realization that this method of communicating is actually very harmful, because you may think that you can continue being in a relationship or a friendship or whatever like this, and that it's not going to have an impact on you. It definitely does, because when someone is constantly making you feel like you can't get anything right, you start to feel that way about yourself too, especially if that person is very influential in your life. So contempt is all about moral superiority and literally holding it against the person. Like, if you care about the relationship, it's very important to remember that you need to care about the way that you're actually communicating with someone, and you need to be curious about them. If you have all these negative thoughts about them and moral superiority towards them, this is already a sign that the relationship is going to a very, very, very bad place, especially if it is being repeated, because it's going to be affecting the person that is experiencing the contempt as well. Okay, so to be honest, I've actually experienced contempt in a friendship, and this was the one factor that made me decide I am done. I'm walking away, and I am never ever coming back to this, because I dealt with it for about 2 decades of my life, and this was someone who meant the absolute world to me. So contempt, when you look at the research, is actually the number one reason for divorce. And this was really the one thing for me that I was like, I'm not willing to deal with this anymore, because it makes you feel completely and utterly disrespected. You feel so disrespected by this person, and it is not a good thing in any relationship. So if you find yourself going into this place of moral superiority, it's really time to do a heart check. If you're a Christian and you're hearing this and you feel, the moral superiority thing coming up, it's really important to surrender those things to God, because at the end of the day, He is the ultimate authority for us. How do we manage contempt? Contempt is essentially something that makes you feel extremely unappreciated, right? And that's why it's really important to show appreciation for your partner. It can be simple as, hey, I really appreciate the fact that you washed up the dishes today. That small things. Sometimes, it doesn't have to be like a super grand gesture. It's really the small things that end up building those, meaningful moments in the relationship, happiness, contentment, it's small things like that, showing appreciation, because then even if you do have one complaint, your partner has a host of experiences to call upon and remember, and they remember all that appreciation. So they know that if you have one problem or 2 problems or 3 problems, it doesn't mean that they don't love you and they don't care about you. It just means that, there's a problem, and it's not the biggest thing. It's not the most defining thing in the relationship. A relationship with just constant contempt, no culture of appreciation whatsoever, will end up with that person who's always being, blamed and criticized, feeling like nothing they do is right, and there's no reason to even stay here anymore. And that's essentially what I felt towards the end of this 2-decade, relationship that I had, because I ended up just feeling like I can't do anything. I say one thing and it's going to be taken wrong. I can't say anything, can't do anything. My trust had also been broken entirely due to certain things that had happened in the relationship. But that feeling of contempt, that was probably the strongest thing, that made me go, yeah, there's no way that, I don't want to fix this anymore, because it's just too painful. The next horseman is defensiveness. Now, defensiveness is usually what happens when the first horseman, which is criticism, shows up, because the person feels like they are being attacked, and they are being attacked, because criticism is definitely an attack on character or personality. Just something to bear in mind. Even I've been really defensive about certain things, because I know where I've come from. We're actually going to be talking about how our earliest relationships shape the rest of our lives in my next Therapy Thursday. I'm very keen to talk about that, but basically I know the reason why I get defensive and when I get defensive, and I've started noticing these little things in my life and little patterns that I'm seeing, and I just wanted to state that all of us go through this. We all have those insecurities. So defensiveness is essentially what happens when we feel that we are being unjustly accused of something. We feel like we're not supposed to be blamed, and we start to make excuses. It can even lead to, from personal experience, I think, manipulation as well as dismissiveness, because what you're going to do is you're going to manipulate or dismiss the person in extreme cases, to shift the blame away from you. You essentially don't want that blame, and you're not going to take accountability. Essentially, when you're doing something like this, you're telling your partner that their concerns, if they brought up anything, is actually nothing. It doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't matter to you. It may be to diffuse the situation. You may think that, this is some strange way of protecting the fight from getting worse. However, it has the potential to actually make it 10 times worse, because you're communicating to your partner that when they are having an actual issue and, they're going through something, and yes, they're coming at you with criticism, but to get into that place, it means that you don't want to take accountability for your actions. I've definitely been in both places. I have criticized, I've also been defensive, and I can understand that, when this is, especially when it's a long relationship and it's been going on for a long period of time, it can be very, very difficult to break cycles. However, the one mistake that I made in this particular example that I'm giving is thinking that I could fix everything on my own without help from the other person. It's literally impossible. You need two people working on themselves to make any relationship work out, because it is never the duty of just one person. It's fool's play. It is very naive to think that you are the one who's responsible for everything, especially when there are so many dynamics at play in relationships. A non-defensive response is essentially when you're willing to just be like, okay, you know what, I've messed up, I've done something bad, and I'm really, really sorry about it. And sometimes there can be genuine reasons for that. When my husband and I have conversations and stuff, sometimes there is a genuine reason for why this is happening, and it's just good to, I find it very easy to talk with my husband about things, because he doesn't take it as, I'm this awful person who's here trying to attack him or anything like that. And I think I don't take the way he talks to me in that way either, because at the end of the day, I know this person, I know his core character, and I'm like, I know who you are, so I know that even if you say something wrong, or if it's going to come out wrong, I can understand that, you may not actually mean it in the way that you mean it, and that's actually giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, which is a really, really good thing. So being able to actually accept responsibility for blame in relationships, it's something that can actually change the dynamics of the relationship and actually improve the relationship as well. Accepting responsibility, knowing where you've gone wrong, and taking accountability for things is really important if you want any relationship to be able to grow. Sometimes it can be a cultural thing where you're afraid to actually do this. I know for a fact that in certain cultures, Asian culture, it can be very difficult for people to accept when they have done something wrong, and they will try to dismiss it or manipulate, the situation to make it look like you're crazy. All of those things are already leading towards, being abusive. If you actually engage in such behaviors in a relationship, you're actually doing more harm than good to it, because you're literally just showing them that you're not going to change, and that all the fault is with one person. And that's never usually the case. It's a very dishonest way of going about relationships. That brings us to the fourth horseman. So this is stonewalling. What is stonewalling? Stonewalling is essentially when you start to withdraw. Stonewalling is essentially when you shut down, you start to withdraw from the relationship, you start to withdraw from the conversation. And most of the time, this is done by men. Because they think that by not arguing or not saying something, this is going to somehow solve the problem. It's going to stop, everything's going to be fine. However, again, when someone's trying to bring something up and you're stonewalling, what happens is that that person ends up feeling a lot more frustration, because they feel like you're just not bothered, you're just trying to get out of the situation. The thing about stonewalling is that this usually happens after the first three horsemen have shown up. It's obviously understandable, because you just want to get out of that situation, right? I mean, who wants to be in a situation where you're constantly getting criticism, contempt, and you're just constantly, getting into that defensive mode, and there's no safe space to talk. It's just a very uncomfortable place to be. So it's completely understandable. However, when you stonewall again and again, and it becomes a habit, and this is something that I noticed in myself when these fights were starting to happen with certain individuals in my life, where all these other three horsemen had been very prevalent, I just wanted to get out of there. It would just be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't deal with the amount of stuff that's coming my way, because I found it so overwhelming. I can honestly tell you what it feels like to go into this place. It's just that you're so overwhelmed psychologically, emotionally, mentally. You're just so overwhelmed. Even physiologically, you will be overwhelmed. Your heart beats racing, you're sweating, you're not even in a place really to think about things rationally or talk about things rationally, and it becomes harder and harder and harder to actually have a proper, decent conversation with the person who's criticizing or having contempt for you and all of that. So stonewalling can become a bad habit, especially when you're going through those three horsemen all the time from this, one individual. How do we actually manage stonewalling? Something that has helped me is to actually just take a break sometimes. And usually during that break, according to the Gottmans, you should actually not be thinking about the fight during this break. Like, just pull away, tell the person that you're having this problem with that, you need a break, and you'll be back. So this is something that I'm now in the habit of trying to practice, because initially I couldn't do it. I was really, really bad at this because I come from a culture where nothing's really talked about. It's just, we have this big explosive fight maybe, and then, it's just forgotten and no one ever brings it up again. And it's very, very challenging for me to actually do this, but I think that it's actually a good thing because luckily for me, I have a very understanding and loving husband. So, this particular thing, I mean, not that I'm actually stonewalling to hurt him. I'm doing it again because sometimes you just feel so overwhelmed by what's happening and you just feel afraid. And it's actually very sad because sometimes you may even stonewall because of what other people have done in your life and not necessarily because of what this one person is, saying or doing. So, yeah. These are, just ways to manage the stonewalling, taking that break, letting your partner know, hey, I need a timeout, I'm going to be back. And usually I would do this and then I would come back to my husband and I'd be like, you know what, I actually didn't have a problem with what you said. It was something else that really bugged me. And I just felt so overwhelmed and so emotional about it that I just couldn't speak. Like, I just needed to take that space back. And that's okay. It's okay to communicate that. It's okay to feel that, as long as you're catching it when it comes along. So, these are things that are important in relationships, and you can't just change these things overnight. They're things that you need to work on consistently. And this is the replacement essentially of behaviors that are destructive to your relationship. You're changing that from a bad behavior into a more positive one. So additional things that I'd like to mention is, to have a successful friendship, relationship, whatever, there's something called turning towards that the Gottmans have discussed. And it's basically like, even if your partner says something really silly, like my husband will be reading something, some article, and he'd be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll just be like, oh, that's interesting. And sometimes I'll ask him questions about it. So it's like a simple thing. You're just acknowledging that, they're reading something and they're interested in it. I think other ways are just taking an interest in what your partner actually is doing or your friends are doing. Be curious about them, be curious about their lives, because that's how you get to know someone. Something that I had heard the Gottmans doing, which I really liked, was that they actually have these open-ended card questions. Like, they have questions on cards, and every single year they ask each other those things, and the answers change over the years, so it's actually really, really cute, because I think that, as you grow in marriage, like, I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago, so I know that in 10 years time I'm probably not going to be 100% the same. And having and the same thing goes for my husband. So having that conversation where we're just asking questions and keeping that curiosity going is actually fun, because it means that you get to learn about that person and appreciate the new things that they have in their lives, or the new ways they've grown. And you also get to watch them shed away all the old things in their lives too. So there's that healthy sense of curiosity and learning more about them, which can make someone feel loved and appreciated and valued. Turning towards your partner actually does have a huge effect on whether your relationship is going to last or not. This has been proven by research and statistics, and obviously you can't always pay attention to your partner, but at least if you're trying to do this for the majority of the time, your relationship is actually going to last. Probably it has a higher chance of lasting more than people who don't actually do this and who turn away from their partners. A few other tips is giving compliments, words of affirmation. That's one of the simplest ways that you can show your partner that you care about them, that you love them. Any relationship or friendship, even any kind of relationship, even if this is a friendship, you can tell someone, I really appreciate these strengths about you. I appreciate the way you communicate this to me. Remembering that this is another human being. For me, this has become a spiritual thing too. To appreciate and to remember the good things about a person, because I think that, that is something, that is a way of honoring God as well in relationships. You can't just go around throwing labels on people. Like, I know in today's culture, it's very easy to start attacking people online. And I shy away from all of that, because morally it goes against what I believe in. And that's why I'm very hesitant to put labels on people, especially evil labels, because it can diminish their self-worth and value. And I'm very careful about things like this because you can see the way that, the way you make someone feel can affect them profoundly in ways that you would never think about. So, as a Christian, again, making sure that you have that respect and love for someone, even if you disagree with them, and going the extra mile is just something that, we're called to do. We reached the end of the 4 horsemen, and I wanted to let you know the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because I think sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing some of these things, in relationships. Sometimes we'll just think that, oh, I need to protect myself. But I think love is not just love is not about protecting yourself. It's about looking at the other person and, trying to see how you can give to them. We currently live in a world and a culture that revolves around looking after yourself only, and I see a lot of this even in the psychological community, self-love, 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 and that's really not the antidote to a lot of things that are happening, because at the end of the day, we have to accept and take that responsibility and recognize that we also contribute to the problems, that happen. I think it's important to remember the 4 horsemen because it's so important to understand the way that our words and our actions can affect someone. And it's also really important to recognize that, we have a choice in the way that we choose to go about things. And we do have control over ourselves when fights happen. We can choose to do things differently. However, there are some relationships that are just not meant to be, especially if this kind of behavior is happening again and again and again. I would find it extremely hard today to be in any kind of relationship, friendship, or whatever, even if it's with a family, like, relative kind of relationship. I would find it very hard to actually be close to that person and invite them into my life, knowing that they have criticism, contempt, and all these different things towards me. I would pray for them and I would love them from afar, but it doesn't mean that I would open the doors and be like, yes, please welcome, come into my life and treat me like dirt, because being kind does not mean that you treat yourself as a doormat. It also means recognizing that, there are some things that are not okay, and respecting yourself as a person. Something I really liked is what my therapist said to me. She was like, how can you show honor to another person without dishonoring yourself? When I say honor, what I mean is it's a Christian thing where, you can show grace and love to someone. Honor them as people and recognize that, these are also made in the image of God. Honor from a Christian perspective is essentially looking at people and realizing they are made in the image of God. And, how can you love them and show respect to them without disrespecting yourself? And there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, that's all I have for you on the subject of the 4 horsemen. And now we're just going to briefly go into the makeup details and close. But I hope that this has been helpful for you. Hey everyone, this is the finished look. I hope that you had a informative time listening to what I have to say about the 4 no-nos in relationships, or the 4 horsemen, of relationships. You just don't do these things. But I just wanted to give you the makeup details before we close for this Therapy Thursday. So you probably would have seen that I went in with, my Nehal & Co foundation. This is, I've been trying to get my shade, but it's not back in stock yet, so I'm waiting for it. But I do love this foundation. It works so well when you have like your skincare already on. It's a wonderful shade. I love it, and I can't wait for them to actually get this back in stock so you can see how flawless my face looks like. The one thing I like about this foundation is that versus my Yensa foundation, which is also one of my favorites, that has a super glowy finish. Like when you finish with the Yensa, it's so glowy. And then this Golden Touch foundation kind of doesn't have that. It's more matte, so it's actually nice for me to have both of these different foundations in my makeup collection at the moment. I love both of them equally, and I don't know which one I would live without. So next, for the rest of my face, I went in with Woosh Beauty. You saw me using that palette, and if you ever want to pick this up, then just remember that I do have a code and you can get some cash off, from purchasing it with that code. And then for my lips, I used 3 shades. I used the shade Celebration and then Cherry Bomb. These are 2 from Ulak. Ulak has amazing lipsticks. They're so moisturizing, and because I felt it was a bit too red and it wasn't really matching with the shades on my eyes, I decided to go in with Spice It Up by MAC Cosmetics. It's a reddish kind of brown shade, and I really like it. And I feel like it got me the perfect shade. It's very hydrating, moisturizing. It's not overly shiny. It was perfect. For my skincare base, I went in with Bobbi Brown. I always clean up my face after doing my eyes, and then I go in with this. Now, this purple eyeliner that you can see underneath my eyes over there is from She Glam. It was a very inexpensive eye pencil, and I really, really love it. I think it's one of the best eyeliners I've tried, so if you ever get a chance to pick these up, go ahead and do it. They are multi-chromes. They're supposed to change colors as I turn my eyes, and something I noticed is that you may be able to see that it's changing colors underneath my eyes. I don't know, because I can see a little bit of a shift happening from the eyeliner. Now from these actual shades themselves, I'm no longer seeing I'm actually not seeing any shifts at all. These shades that I have on my eyes, technically it is a duochrome palette, so there should have been shifts, but I think because I purchased this palette so long ago, I think some of the shifts have actually just gone, but I still love the shades. I mean, look at this. It's so vibrant, so gorgeous. I would not give this palette up for anything, and it's definitely and it's an expired palette. Like, I haven't seen this show up again on Simply Posh's page in a really long time, but this is the palette that I always think of whenever autumn starts to come around, because it's so beautiful and I love it. And you know, the matte shades that I got were from Berry Icy. You saw what I used, and then the other one was you know, citrus. The other one was Citrus Punch over here. So, you know, you can see that Simply Posh has just got gorgeous, gorgeous shades. I'm looking forward to their next palette. I'm, you know, wondering what that's going to look like. But, you know, for now, I really love the way that this worked. And if you saw, I didn't put too much of my white base, which is how that really bright green showed up looking like that. I'm talking about the matte shade over here. So usually for people of my skin tone, because we don't have naturally like white skin, the shade is going to show up differently, and it does show up differently. But if I had actually gone in with like a P. Louise base or whatever, it probably would have been a lot brighter than, you know, what it's looking like here. However, I don't really mind this because I feel like this is making it even more perfect for autumn. It's not looking like a summery kind of green at the moment on me. It's looking like a beautiful transition, moving from those greens to those, you know, gorgeous oranges, and then moving into red, and then you've got that, you know, really lovely pink kind of thing going on there because I mixed up two shades. So this is all I have for you today on Therapy Thursday. I certainly had fun talking about the 4 Horsemen of Relationships, and you know, if you have any questions, you want more information, I will put a couple of links into this video so that you can go and check those out for yourself. And you can also drop questions in the comments below, because I would be happy to, you know, share my experience with you. If you'd like to see more Therapy Thursday videos, remember to check out the playlist that's going to be coming at the end of this video. And until then, I hope that you stay safe. Remember to look after yourself, and I will see you soon for another Therapy Thursday in 2 weeks' time. Lots of love. Bye.